Donkey Kong is one of the most successful franchises in the world. Because of this, these games often are compared to each other, whether being the 2D games, the 3D games, or the spin offs. But here are some key differences that really change how you play the games. I'll be going over the entire history of the Donkey Kong franchises and about the games that nobody even talks about. Starting off with the arcade game Donkey Kong. The original Donkey Kong game for the arcade was not just a game, it was the final hope for Nintendo before they went bankrupt. You see, Nintendo had been messing around in the gaming and non gaming industry. They had made some arcade games before, but their budget was getting destroyed, and they put it all on Donkey Kong. But Donkey Kong's not just a normal arcade game, it's very addictive, and you can play it anywhere. You don't need to go and buy a home console. You just go to your local arcade and play it for 25 cents. But you see, that's not just the point. In this game, you play as Jumpman. Yes, he's not named Mario yet. And you are trying to save Pauline. Yes, not Peach yet. But the main goal of the game is also to defeat and destroy Donkey Kong. It is so addictive, you can spend so many hours playing this game. And in my opinion, it's not an easy game. It's not a hard game, but it's a mild one. And it was really feels like for 1981, it doesn't need to be like a 3D platformer. It was still an amazing accomplishment for the time. But 1 year later, something interesting happened. A brand new Donkey Kong game in the series was released, titled Donkey Kong Jr. This game does not star Donkey Kong as you would expect. It actually stars Donkey Kong Jr. I know, what a surprise. But here's the interesting part. You can play as Donkey Kong Jr. and you're trying to save Donkey Kong from evil Jumpman. Yes, not Mario yet. But it's really interesting because you can like climb on the vines, and it's very different from the traditional Donkey Kong game, and it's different, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it was still a big hit despite not being exactly what Nintendo wanted. But you really only played it if you were a diehard Nintendo fan or if you didn't play the original. Donkey Kong 3 was a brand new spin on the Donkey Kong series, and it was completely different from the two that came before it. It was the final arcade game for Nintendo before their first console that releases 1 year later. And in this case, you play as Jumpman again, and you're trying to make it so Donkey Kong can escape from the bugs by using bug spray. It's kind of weird, but that doesn't mean it's bad. But here is the funny part. Most people don't know about this game. I bet you didn't even know about this game, that it even existed. And that's the crazy part. Like, bug spray to get Donkey Kong out. This is the type of secret games that I'm talking about here. Games that nobody else know that are real. But next, we have to talk about the time gap. Yes, you guys aren't primarily familiar probably with the time gap. You see, Nintendo took a break from Donkey Kong. You see, after Donkey Kong 3 came out, it took 10 years for another game to come out in Donkey Kong Country. And now that they were competing against Sega with 16-bit graphics, they needed a premier game to launch near the SNES. And one of their chosen ones were Donkey Kong. But they didn't have the developers to do it, so they chose to outsource it to a different development studio. And they chose Rareware, which was known for making some other games in the past, and, well, Donkey Kong Country happened. Donkey Kong Country eventually released, and it was a magical game. Not only did it revive the Donkey Kong series, but it also added things that people wanted so much for the past decade. Like, for example, you now have the classic partner of Diddy Kong, and along your adventure, you can find Cranky Kong, Funky Kong, and Candy Kong that will all help you on your adventure. You have the animal buddies like Rambi, and the main plot is you're trying to defeat the Kremlings and their leader of King K. Rool, which is a very interesting idea for a boss fight for a Donkey Kong Country game. And I really think that the characters were amazing in this game. Not only was this game amazing, it was amazing critically from the review standards, and it also sold 10 million copies. You might not actually think of this game as Donkey Kong Country 2 because it's not actually a Donkey Kong game. It's actually a Diddy Kong game where you are trying to save Donkey Kong as Diddy Kong. And to keep the tag teaming mechanic, a brand new Kong was added to the formula, being Dixie Kong, a brand new protagonist that made this game amazing as well, being the female version of Diddy Kong. And there's so much to offer in this game, from the secret rooms to the banana coins to the Kremlin coins. This game is the best Donkey Kong Country mechanics in my opinion. And honestly, it is the best Donkey Kong Country game in my opinion. Because this game didn't sell 10 million, it only sold 5. But for not being a Donkey Kong game, for being a Diddy Kong game, that is truly amazing. And it gives an origin story for another character, and their gameplay mechanics are so fun here. So I really recommend this game. Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie Kong's Double Trouble is a completely new game. It differs entirely from the previous games that we've already seen. It also adds a brand new character. They replaced Diddy Kong with Kiddy Kong, which is a brand new protagonist because Dixie Kong is supposedly watching Kiddy Kong because they're cousins. I didn't really understand that part, but maybe you do. I don't know. But this game was doomed from the beginning because the N64 was going to release later that year, and NES games are not really going to do well because everybody was excited for the big 3D, so this game sold horribly. But it was finally over with the 2D platformers for a while, and we wouldn't see a 2D platformer until like 10 years. Before we move on to the next area of Donkey Kong and the fully 3D games, I'm just going to quickly point out that on the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, there were the Donkey Kong Land games. They were just ports, there were no content, and it's a smaller screen, it's no color. It's not as good as the other games, but I just thought it'd be important to point out since we're going over the entire history of Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong 64 changed everything. It was not just the first brand new 3D Donkey Kong game, but it also was filled to the brim with collectibles and characters you can collect. The story was amazing with the Kremlings and King K. Rool returning, and the 3D gameplay was amazing. This was hailed as the #1 game on the N64 for a while by many people. I wouldn't call it the best game, I think there's definitely some better ones, but it's still above average, and it's really good. The collectibles can get to be a bit annoying, but it's not really that big of a problem because you still want to explore the whole game. Having so many bananas required to get to the next stage can be very annoying though. It's not what I would have wanted, but it's still a part of the game and it's still amazing. That doesn't make the game not amazing. This game wasn't just amazing critically though. It was also amazing due to its sales numbers. And after the flop of Donkey Kong Country 3, this return to form was truly amazing, and it's what everybody was hoping for. You see, this is about the time when Rare had to stop making Donkey Kong games. You see, this whole time Rare's been the one making the Donkey Kong games, but they're actually not making them after Donkey Kong 64. You see, with the new price of 3D games, the share that Nintendo bought in their company just wasn't enough. So they had to find a new home, so they ended up abandoning completely the brand new Donkey Kong IP that they've been working on. And they'd had to sacrifice it, which probably wasn't what they wanted, but that means that a bunch of new developers were about to get in. And for the next few years, Donkey Kong was in a rough spot. That started off with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Just because Rare was done with the franchise doesn't mean that this game was going to be bad, but it was. So you see, during this time, the Donkey Konga series was able to make their own controller called the Donkey Kong. And got barrels that you can like slap to make noise. And that's so cool, but it's not really what we want to see. We want to see an actual Donkey Kong game, not one that uses weird bongos. There were 3 games between 2003 and 2005. They all did really poorly, and I guess if you want a rhythm Donkey Kong game where you have to slap the bongos, I guess that's cool, but the next game is a better one, by far. The next game was a return to the Donkey Kong 2D formula in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. This was the semi-revival of Donkey Kong 2D before we got some fully original games a bit later. Jungle Beat also used the bongos, and that's how you moved. You slap the bongos and then you move. It's very different from the other 2D Donkey Kongs, which makes it a lot easier than the other 2D Donkey Kongs, unless you have a hard time hitting bongos correctly, but you just need to hit them. Anyway, the main problem with this is the challenge just isn't there for me, in my opinion. But in this game, you have to try and go for style points by doing combos in the air, which I guess is interesting. But I just kind of want to see more in Donkey Kong games. Next up were the Game Boy Advanced ports. They were very similar to the Game Boy ports, but they finally added color, just something important to mention. Next up is Donkey Kong King of Swing. This was a tiny based puzzle game for the Game Boy Advance where you have to swing around. And this also goes for its sequel, Jungle Climber, for the DS 2 years later. These games were both bad in my opinion. They were boring, nothing really about them. You were just swinging on like bananas. It's not really that interesting, and I think that they could have made these games better, but alas, that's what we ended up with. Next up, after all of that, is Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, the final Donkey Kong spin-off before we got a true entry in the Donkey Kong 2D series. We got Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, which is a racing game that came out 1 year before Mario Kart Wii, where you have to shake the Wii remote. I know it sucks because the bongos were only for the GameCube, and all those Barrel Blast or like Jungle Beat games or Conga games, they're all done because the bongos only work on the GameCube. And since this game was delayed from the GameCube to the Wii, this game suffered completely, and it's really the worst Donkey Kong game of all time, in my opinion. It's just so boring. It's literally just came out a year before Mario Kart Wii. But now we finally made it to the re-era, you could call it, of Donkey Kong, where we finally got a new 2D game. Yes, it has been since the SNES since we got a true 2D game, and we're about to. But now we get into the modern era of Donkey Kong, and some interesting things happen here. First of all, we get brand new developers that are developing these games, like Donkey Kong Country Returns. Donkey Kong Country Returns was the next game in the series that released in 2010. And this game was amazing. But first of all, this game was new developers that made it. So, what were the developers? Many people already know this, but this was Retro Studios. After they finished up Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3, and they cooked. You see, they ended up doing so well on this game, and this game is just amazing, especially the sequel. But now let's get into this actual game. Well, first of all, there's just so much to talk about. The gameplay is just fun. That's the most important part, but the thing is, it's just fun. Like, I don't really know what else I'm supposed to say. You can now have a partner of Diddy Kong with the jetpack, which I think is a pretty cool feature that they added. There's a ton of collectibles, from the puzzle pieces to the Kong letters. And then you can do some even cooler stuff like the mine cart, which is really fun and used in specific levels. And we even have the rocket barrel, which is also used in levels that is really fun and interesting to use. And Rambi, which can be used to navigate. And I really like the collectibles, including the Kong letters and the puzzle pieces, because they both add a ton of stuff. And those Kong level stages that you get from getting all the Kong letters in one world, they are just the best in the game. Like, I know they're the hardest, but that's what makes it fun. You know? Also, the motion controls are amazing. Like, there's just so much in this game. Like, I know this is for the Wii, and motion controls were kind of like overused. But you gotta understand that there's just so much. Like, there's just so much content. I'm just looking at the package of the game. There's also items that you can use. Like, you can have a red balloon that lifts you in the air. Like, there's just so much stuff you can do, like extra DK barrels or squawks or heart boosts. Like, there's just so much. And that's why this game is so amazing. It also has some of the amazing secret rooms. There were secret rooms in the other places, but I mainly glanced over them because they're just so good at this game. And that's not all. Like, even the time trials were fun. But everything I've said for this game is not just for this game, it's also for its sequel. The next game, and the final 2D game, was released on the Wii U all the way back in 2014, being Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Tropical Freeze was the best 2D platformer in the Donkey Kong franchise, in my opinion. Maybe it's Country 2 might be, but you can see that the sequel is always the best, which I think is very interesting. But on top of all this, the game's just fun. Like, I know I went over this in its predecessor, Returns, but all of these are just so fun. There's so many cool new mechanics, like the underwater mechanic. Like, that wasn't in the past game. Retro Studios is just showing how good they can make games, and that's why they were trusted with this IP. There's so many cool and new movement mechanics, but what I find the most interesting is this game actually sold worse than its Wii predecessor, being Returns. And I think that's very interesting. But the only reason behind that is because it was like on the Wii U and the other one was on the Wii. And that's kind of a big deal because the Wii U didn't actually sell. But that was fixed a bit later. But I just think that that's some important information to know because, that's how bad the Wii U was. A better game sells worse. But we already knew that for most games. I just think it's funny how they always end up doing it. But there's something other new that I think is very important. Now, mine carts and like rocket barrels, they have their own health points, which I think is very cool and important. Then you've got Diddy Kong with the jetpack, but you also have newcomers like Dixie Kong with the hair twirl. Then you have another newcomer in the form of Cranky Kong with the pogo stick. And the co-op in this game is truly amazing. Like, if you don't have this game and you own a Wii U or a Switch, you probably should fix that. But I really think that this game is truly amazing. And there's all these cool shops, and there's all this other stuff that you can interact with. And that brings me to the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch had ports of Tropical Freeze and Returns HD. Returns HD released in 2025, and Tropical Freeze released in 2018. Tropical Freeze added Funky Kong, and Returns HD added nothing. Yes, I know, that's sad. Then we have Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is a much bigger game than all of these others and is the first true 3D platformer since all the way back with Donkey Kong 64. This game has so much to offer, from the Kong Bonanza to all the other Bonanza transformations, to the Bananium chips, the Bananium gems, the skill tree, all this stuff that's important. The story looks to be amazing with the whole Voidco company thing. I think that's a really good storytelling idea. Of course, we've got all the ancient ruins, and there's just so much to look forward to in this game. This is the most hyped game with the Switch 2 launch, and it's coming out in like a couple of days as of recording this. So I think that this could be an amazing game. We don't truly know yet, but we have played the demos, most of us have at least, and we can see that this game looks to be amazing. And we don't have sales yet, we don't have any of that, but Bonanza looks to be an amazing place for the redesign. Some also tinier stuff that I didn't cover is like the Donkey Kong theme park, but that's like not a game, so I didn't really cover it. But yeah, that is the entire history of Donkey Kong. You might have noticed that I covered some games you probably didn't know about, like King of Swing, Donkey Kong 3, and even Barrel Blast. That you might have known that, I don't know. But thank you for watching today's video. This video took so much time to make, and I would really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.